Hello and welcome to another episode of Heart of Entrepreneurship, where myself and Dave Cashin explore how to have your heart going while being an entrepreneur. And we challenge the assumption that's common, which is, in order to build a startup, I have to eat glass and get punched in the face, and it's going to be this horrible, painful experience. But instead, we think it can be a loving, uplifting, uh, and beautiful experience with a lot of tools and a lot of self introspection and awareness. So that's the point of this podcast. Today's episode is been a tool we're going to introduce, and it shows up in a lot of different places in I don't know personal growth work. I'll call it. Um, and I've used it a ton. I've been using it a lot recently, so I think that could be fun to talk a little bit about and even do an exercise today. But let's kick it off. We're talking about the topic is personas. That's kind of the broad topic. And I'll just start, Dave. What is a persona?
Sure. Yeah, I first learned about personas from the Conscious Leadership Group, and I think they learned about it from Katie and Gay Hendricks, just to give credit. And the idea is that there are these patterns that we learn um, to survive, basically, to ways of getting our needs met. Most of these are learned, in the first sort of 8, 10 years of our life. You can think of them as groupings of patterns, like ways of seeing the world, ways of thinking, ways of behaving that sort of
Mm-hmm.
get grouped together. And what's interesting about them is for a lot of people, they think of that as who they are. Like, oh, I'm the firefighter. I'm the one
I'm a
who comes
hustler.
in. I'm the hustler. I'm the hero. I'm the one that, uh, let's say firefighter. I'm the one that comes in and stays cool under pressure and can deal with like really crazy crises. And what we don't realize is that, um, we don't tend to see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And so we'll project our personas onto the world and we'll either, filter out, I'll just keep playing with this firefighter example, filter out the sort of data and only see the crises because, to a firefighter, everything's a fire.
Right.
Um, or we'll unconsciously create them or at least attract people who see things as crises. Uh, and so our world becomes like this self-validating experience where like, yeah, everything's a fire and I'm a firefighter.
Right.
And, I have lots of clients who are like, oh, God, they're sort of bemoaning it like, oh, Dave, I'm constantly having to fight fires, not realizing that they're actually attracting, creating, perceiving the world as a series of fires so that their persona has, is sort of validated.
And
And
I,
one,
I always think of the mental, like, I always like to think in extremes to point this out. And I don't know why
mm,
this one just keeps coming to my mind, but like the, there's this woman on TikTok who used to be a newscaster who's now a mom, and she's a stay-at-home mom, but as she has a massive TikTok following because she puts on her newscaster voice and she reports on her toddler. She's like, "This is
that's
Kayla reporting
funny.
live. My son has just thrown poop on the ground and da 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 da." And but if for anyone listening, it's like you think of that. You have to think of people who are of extreme. That's like a really easy way to see it. Is like, oh yeah, when someone goes on to be a newscaster, that's not who they are. That's like it's a very specific persona that they've taken, or even like as someone who's a parent, I think, I oftentimes we show up differently as dad. I show up differently as a dad than I do as a friend, and so I think just this idea that we have multiple masks or multiple different ways we show up, and I'm sure everybody has the friend who's, anytime they tell a story, they're the sort of focal point and the hero of the story, or the other friend who's always kind of Eeyore and everything like. And I think when you see these things in extremes, they're easier to kind of because most of us don't live in the extremes. We live in a lot of different versions of it.
Yeah, I like your newscaster example because it's clear in that case. It's almost like putting on the uniform to go to work,
Yeah.
right? And to be clear, these are useful. We're not saying like, oh, it's bad to have a persona. It's just, the way I always heard it from Dana Chapman from Conscious Leadership was either you play your persona or it plays you,
Hmm.
right? So it's like
Right.
if you're playing a part, if you're playing a role, if you're aware you're playing it, you can do it consciously and say, okay, this situation it calls for my firefighter persona because this is a real crisis. And I need to come in and I need to
Totally.
assess it, take it.
Well, one
Um,
of the pieces of advice I give to young founders all the time when I'll see this stuff with leadership and other things, and one of the simplest things I do, and this is what I did when I became a CEO at 25, 26, is for the first couple of years, I was like, what would the CEO of a company do in this situation? Like, I would just ask myself that
mm,
question, and I used it as a tool,
right. Like I'll
right?
step into the
Yeah, they
the
need to
successful
they
CEO
need to tell everybody
persona
what to
and
do right now, or they need to come up with deadlines for the game plan, or this person. I wasn't always right about what I guessed, but I had to
yeah,
come up with some. I was 25. I was an associate, like that was my previous job, and all of a sudden I had a team of 10 people all staring at me, and that's a young founder of advice I give, which is actually to create a persona, to effectively
mm.
go, who is, you are the CEO of this company, and what should the CEO do, and what would they say, and how would they react, and it's kind of like training wheels for a little bit of fake it till you make it.
It reminds me a little bit of the notion of be, do, have. Like most people live like, oh, if I do this, then I'll have these results and then I'll be this way,
Right.
and then I'll be confident. And I hear you kind of pointing to a little bit, okay, I'm going to choose to be a confident CEO and then see what occurs to me to do. And then I'll have confidence. And I like that idea that like you can
Yeah.
be really conscious and intentional about who are you being, what persona you're playing. But most of the time, most people, the persona is playing them. It's
Yeah, we're
unconscious.
not aware that
But
we're showing up that way because
yeah,
it's like, again, we would describe it as our personality or who we are.
I was
What,
going to
so
give.
in conscious leadership, there's, we talk about this being in a state of threat or being in a state of sort of presence or openness. When you're in a state of threat, and these are, I think they're common from psychology, what are the three most common personas?
Yeah, I like the idea of thinking of them as personas. They're encapsulated in what I've heard called the drama triangle or the fear triangle. So one is victim, right? That's often how we think of threat. It's like, oh, I'm a victim. Um, but there are actually other flavors of victimhood. The other is bully or villain, we could call it. And then the third is hero or savior. And the the victim, as it sounds, is this persona is like, oh, poor me, right? It's hard, it's happening to me. The bully is like actually feels quite alone and scared, but tends to like um need to control and need power, and so the bully tends to show up super righteous and judgmental and blamey. And sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes, like we have an inner bully, right? So there's a whole other conversation around how the voice in our head can play these personas, right? Because we'll often experience our inner bully that's like, "Wow, you screwed that up. What's the
Right,
matter with
right,
you?
right,
You need to
right.
do better." Right. And that's, but then we'll also sometimes outwardly play that, especially if we have an active inner bully. And then the savior tends to basically want to avoid feeling something by um, kind of rescuing the situation. It's like,
Yep.
oh, I want to save you from feeling sad so that I don't have to feel sad. Um,
I don't know. An example of this may be, you know, you're 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 missing your sales team doesn't hit their quota for the quarter. They miss their number, and immediately the poor sales person is not going to get paid their salary. They're upset. They're complaining that the system wasn't fair for them. You're looking at your sales leader, blaming your sales leader. They're the villain. They screwed this up. They didn't project properly, whatever. And you're going to come in as the founder, of course, and you're going to save the day because you're going to tell the person they're valued, come up with a comp plan that changes. That
it's okay, guys. It's all gonna
Yeah,
be
we'll we'll
okay. Maybe a
we'll
rah
we'll
rah
save this,
speech.
and this is a real
Yeah.
example. That's why it came to mind. That's happening, and I'm gonna come up with a plan that everybody kind of saves face, and we all move forward. Maybe one. So just to make sure that's clear, that in this case, this sort of example, the employee was the victim, this leader, the VP, let's call it, was the villain, and you, the
And
founder, get to be the hero, which is not an uncommon pattern for founders. We
yes.
oftentimes put ourselves in
But-
that hero seat.
And just to um, expand a little bit. So sometimes it's like that where there are three different
I
humans
want to
that
come back.
play.
I know where you're going. I want to come back to it.
Okay,
I
go
want to come
ahead.
back to it. Before, so I want to go there because I'll tell you why in a second. But so in that case, I just want to be clear. What's wrong with that? If I'm the founder and I come in and I save the day, like, dude, that's my job. I'm the founder. What's the trouble with that?
So, what tends to happen is you don't fundamentally resolve the issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? The hero creates temporary relief. So, okay, everyone feels a little better, but you haven't actually learned. People haven't taken responsibility in the sense of like, oh, I see how I created this. Like this, if the salesperson really has to face like, oh, how did I said I wanted to hit my quota, but I missed it. Okay, what do I need to do differently? What do I learn? Sales manager, doesn't have to face, okay, how did I sort of co-create this, right? And so it undermines learning, growth, um, and you don't fundamentally resolve the issue. So you'll end up repeating the cycle, and then
Right.
often heroes end up resenting the the victim that they save
Yep.
because it's like, oh, I had to come here and do this. Um, and so it's not clean. And
Yeah,
then it
and I
also
think
rein
I would just add just a couple in this example. And some because I think in my experience with doing this, sometimes these things are pretty subtle and the unlocks are subtle. So there could just be like, hey, the salesperson didn't make enough phone calls, and you're not actually holding them accountable for that. That's an obvious one. But a less obvious one could be the salesperson didn't speak up when they realized the goal didn't make any sense, and they have to recognize
totally.
that they created that, and by not by just band-aiding the situation, you end up, or the sales leader just went with the founder's number and didn't actually reconcile so I think a lot of the stuff, sometimes there's very obvious aspects of responsibility in my experience, but oftentimes they're like candor is missing, or feeling a feeling was missing, or there's something else that didn't happen that allowed that, and then that, as you said, it continues to just recycle and repeat throughout an organization and for a
Well,
person.
yeah, and to go even further, the founder might unconsciously create these unattainable goals so that they get to be
The hero.
the hero, right? That's again
Right.
back to the like we tend to create reality as we are. So if the founder's identified and gets worth and value from being the hero or the savior, they may actually create situations where they have to come in and save the day,
Yeah.
which isn't ultimately empowering the people on the team. It's not ultimately scalable, doesn't allow you
Yeah,
to get that
and
level.
talk about the resentment thing, because I think it's obvious to me, but I don't think it's always obvious. So let's you can you use the example that the founder did this. He solved the problem for their sales leader and the employee with some whatever. Can you unpack a little bit this notion of how how being the hero or the savior creates resentment in that person? Um, and the in this example, is the founder solves the day, solves a problem that comes
Yeah.
up. How does that start to generate resentment for them?
Yeah. So, um, well, there's two things I'd say. One is heroes require victims. So, if you're in the hero role, you are seeing other people on the team as victims. Like you're not seeing them as empowered, responsible, humans, leaders, contributors. And so even just seeing them that way will affect the way they see themselves. Like you're kind of complicit in the story that they're a victim. And then over time, the victims don't feel because they feel like victims, they don't tend to feel um, grateful and appreciative. They feel diminished. And so the heroes keep heroing, and then they expect to be celebrated and appreciated for their act of heroism. And when they're not, they get really resentful.
Yeah. And I mean, the example for this one, just to keep playing it forward, is the founder solves this problem. They start feeling resentment towards their sales leader. They come to Dave in their session and they go, "Man, my sales leader, they're never on top of their stuff. They're, blah blah blah." And then the sales leader is like, "Well, what's the point of me setting the plan and the quota anyway? Because the founder's just gonna muck it up the second I do it. So I'm gonna lean out now." And then the founder turns around and is like, "Wait, I'm doing all this for you, and you're not even taking responsibility and ownership." And it's like you said earlier, it makes everything a little messy. It's just not very clean.
Yeah. And ultimately, if you're going to scale a business, like people need to be taking responsibility for their own contribution. They need to learn and grow, and frankly, they need to feel all their feelings. Like again, the real underlying motivation of the savior tends to be, oh, I don't want anyone to feel bad or
Right.
sad or upset. And if the, let's just take the salesperson never gets to feel the disappointment or frustration, they're not going to connect with like what's actually true for them. They're not going to kind of move past it and get present and be able to, perform at their best.
Yeah, that makes sense. The so earlier you were going somewhere, and I told you to stop or pause, and because I think every time you first explain this to me, and anytime I explain to someone else, everybody's first mental model is to create three people, and to essentially say there's I'm this, I'm victim, I'm villain, I'm hero, and then even if you talk through transferring those things, um, they'll stay with the same three people and go, okay, well, yeah, I can see how they're the they'll kind of go through these three personas. But I think what you were going to say earlier is in reality, this is all just happening in one person's mind. And it's a mental model that's actually a pattern that's going on in our own minds. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, yeah. So these dramas do play
Was that
out.
where you were going to go, by the way?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, great tee up. These dramas do tend to play out in families, in work dynamics where there's, three different people involved. Like for me growing up, my dad and stepmom were like the villain in my movie. I was the poor, young victim, and my mom was the savior. It would always make me feel better, but I never fundamentally addressed, the issue for a long time. Um, and they also occur inside of us, and we tend to rotate through those three different roles where it's like, oh, poor me, this happened to me, and then we'll go into blame and say, oh, it was their fault, or it was my fault, and then we'll go, ah, okay, it's okay. Or by the way, another version of hero is like there's hero moves we can do, like I'll just go have a glass of wine, or I'll just go watch Netflix or veg out. And a lot of the distractions that, people think of as like addictive behavior, I'm addicted to my phone, or I'll
Right.
just go watch, YouTube or scroll on
Or
Twitter
even
X.
a common one for founders, myself, this is like just avoiding, like I just won't look at the numbers, or I'm just going to wade away from that situation, and I'm going to just
Yeah,
look the
I don't
other
want to
way.
feel I don't want to feel the disappointment or fear, so I'll just not look at it, or I'll ignore it, or I'll pretend things are better than they are. Um, I'm fond of saying, I probably said this in a previous episode, that the team that sees reality the clearest wins.
Yeah.
And this is one way we tend to avoid reality is by seeing it through this distorted lens of these different, personas.
Yeah. So when you start doing this, it's actually the maybe we can use the same example of the founder. So how would you, if you were coaching a founder who was giving you this exact situation, how would you help them see their own movements on the triangle themselves? Those three
Yeah.
personas they're taking on.
Yeah. One of the things I really appreciate about the fear triangle or drama triangle is most of the time when I start to explain it, people are like, oh God, I totally see myself in that, right? It just has a lot of face validity. It's like we know drama as humans, right? We go see dramas. Movies are based on this pattern, right? It's like there's the damsel in distress and the hero and the Lex Luthor, the villain. Um, so anytime, well, blame is usually either blame or victimhood are usually easy places to start. The hero or savior tends to be the trickiest one because, like you said, a lot of people think, well, isn't that a good thing that, it's not my job to come in and
Right.
make things okay? So villain's pretty relatively straightforward. It's just, are you kind of, I like the motion, I think it was like that finger pointing motion. Are you just blaming, right? Like, oh, are you blaming? Are you judging? Are you criticizing? Or are you hearing inside your mind blame, judgment, criticism? That's basically there tends to be a little bit of anger in it. That's generally the signature of the villain or bully. Um, if you're more in this state, like so many founders are like, I'm stressed out, I'm so stressed out. right? And they're typically experiencing that they're a victim to their workload or to their financing round or to their goals.
Right.
Um,
Or their
so
team.
any or to their team or to yeah, just the macro environment or how it's so hard, right? Anytime you hear yourself saying, "Oh, it's hard," or essentially that energy of "poor me," that's a good sign you're in victim mode. I mean, really, anytime you're seeing your experience as um, conditional, as at the effect of something outside of you,
Right.
you're seeing yourself as victim. And then again, the hero, the most obvious is typically like, um, I don't want them to feel bad. I don't want that. There's some way you're trying to manage or control how other people feel.
Mm.
Again, usually really because we're trying to manage how we feel. Like,
Right.
I don't want to feel what I'd have to feel if they feel angry or sad.
Right.
So that's to me, that's the it's subtle, but that's usually the most clear way. But yeah, if you're stepping in and saving the day, like literally, like you're, um, micromanagement is often a form of like hero moves. If you're feel like you have a pattern, like a repeated pattern of like you're stepping in to do the work, you're
Right.
probably in hero mode.
Yeah, and in this example, I think it's probably maybe helpful, like the the if you zoom out, you're like, oh yeah, compensation quota missed, plan bad, I fixed. That's kind of the one version of it. But in these situations, the at least in my experience, and I think you see this is like everybody emotionally is kind of rotating around their own triangle. So in this case, the founder may feel like a victim to the sales leader. Oh gosh, if this gal could just put together a good plan, then I wouldn't have to come and swoop in here. I'm gonna have to hero it, and that was a little bit more like villain, actually, like blaming them, and then also feeling like it's so hard to hire people, so hard to hire good people, and that's why I'm in this mess. And so
Yes.
I'm just making that up because I think every time like when you first explain this to people, they almost always do what I just did, which is make it about three people. But then very
Mm,
quickly in anyone's individual experience, they're almost always rotating around those three personas in their
yes.
head.
Totally. Yeah, we cycle through this, fear triangle, drama triangle all the time. And if you really start paying attention, the voice in your head is mostly playing those three roles most of the time.
Right.
Right. So it's interesting to just watch it go, what's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. And then go, oh God, it's so poor me. This is so stressful. This is so hard. I know. Well, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And then we just cycle through it.
I don't want to be like this. Okay, yeah, I should really tell this person that they're an asshole, but I no, I
Yeah.
shouldn't. That's not nice. That wouldn't be a nice thing to do. And
Yeah, and by the way, so much of our self-improvement comes from this fear triangle, right? What's the matter with
mm,
you? You should be better at this. You should be more confident. You should be but it's hard. Okay, I'm gonna have a 30-day plan. I'm gonna, think of
right,
like how much how many products and services are sold to us as hero moves. Like
right,
this will be the thing that will, you'll finally lose the weight. And then, how many times does it actually work? Because when we're in that cycle, we just tend to recycle. Again, that's the issue. And then I think you were alluding to this, or it's like, okay, so now, great, or maybe it's the unasked question, but okay, great. I recognize I'm in the
I
triangle.
I want to before we
Well,
do that, I want to just talk about IFS for 1 second because I think of
okay.
IFS as the 201 of the drama triangle.
Yeah, sure,
You're like
sure.
once okay for you're like all right
Yep.
you believe the persona thing. Everyone listening's like okay yeah I see those personas. The newscaster I get it.
Yeah,
I play that role. Oh I see those three and I can see how I find myself in those.
yeah,
Let's talk briefly just about. I don't want to spend a ton of time, but just because
yeah,
I
sure.
found it to be a really
Or
powerful tool.
I'm gonna go two places. First, within those three, if we call those like meta personas, victim, villain, hero, or victim, bully, savior, um, there's a whole bunch of personas, right?
Right,
So even within, let's say, savior or hero, it could be you're the firefighter, it could be you're the peacemaker, it could be you're the cheerleader,
right.
right? It
Like for
could be
me,
your
I'll just like my big hero moves are typically avoiding, or they are coming in with a solution, like the idea
yeah,
that's gonna solve it.
yeah.
Um,
And that's probably a persona of yours, the idea
100%.
guy. I
Yeah,
got it, guys. Yeah, and one of mine is the nice guy, right? And this, I thought that was just me. I'm just a nice guy, and I had to really face this to become as powerful a coach as I wanted to be, because that's not what serves clients all the time. Like, yeah,
Right.
sometimes it's great to be loving and compassionate and the nurturer, and sometimes clients need like a loving kick in the ass, right?
Right.
So I had to really work on um disidentifying with that persona. And this I just, I've said this, I said this in some video or something, that like is an interesting nuance, because a lot of clients will be like, oh no, that's not me, that's not authentic,
Yeah.
right? If I'm like, oh, your team needs you to be like the rah-rah cheerleader right now, and maybe it's a, I'm gonna stereotype, but like a former engineer or CEO, like, no, that's not me, that's not authentic. I'm like, bullshit, it's just not comfortable.
Right.
Right, and there's this subtle distinction between like true authenticity and just comfort, right? Oh, I'm
Right.
just comfortable for me to be the nice guy. Yeah, but to really serve people, sometimes I have to express anger that's arising, or, some fierce challenger, which is not inauthentic. It actually is arising in me. It's just with my persona, it's almost like it doesn't feel comfortable
We shut
because
it
I'm,
down.
I'm
Yeah.
just used to being the nice guy.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I just want to name that inside of these three, there's lots of other personas, and it's really useful to get clear about your persona. I have like whatever it is, like a PowerPoint with like all my, a bunch of my different
Yeah.
personas, and I kind of describe them, and I have found
Well,
that
and like
really
I think the
useful.
Enneagram is really helpful in your default persona. Like mine tend to be pretty
Yeah.
true. And then also conscious leadership has a bunch of worksheets that give you a subset of what are hero-like personalities that, and it's
Yep.
like some people are just more, again, these sub personas underneath those big,
Tenants, tendencies.
yeah, they just have tendencies.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, so amongst those three, hero, victim, and villain, the one that you most don't think you are is probably the one, it's like the blind spot. Like,
Yep.
I could really see my victim and villain, but I was like, no, no, I don't hero people. Like, I'm a coach, I know how to do and I realized for so long I would coach from a hero place,
Mm.
and be like with you, Jesse, if I may, there was times where you're like, oh, I feel whatever shame around this thing. I'm like, no, don't you see, you're such a
Right,
great
right, right, right,
person. Like, shame is just a story. You don't need to feel that. And I think it was actually a disservice.
right.
So I kind of woke up to that pattern because it was the one I thought I didn't play. So if there's one you're like, no, no, I'm not, oh, I'm not this, that's probably
Yeah.
the one
Or
that you're
and or
most,
the one that irritates you in other people a lot. And like for me, and it's so recent. It's like in the last 2 or 3 years, I've like found that I actually like victim is like I was like I'm never a victim. I like never. Like it felt so not who I was, so opposite, and it turns out there's a really big part of me that is, and it's like unfortunately like unseen and sort of
yeah, it's a blind spot.
undernourished. Um,
Yeah, and again, all these roles are adaptive, right? It's not a problem, but it's
right,
just, are we conscious about them or not? Um, Okay, so you asked about IFS. So IFS stands for Internal Family Systems. There was a psychologist named Richard Schwartz who was a family systems therapist. So what family systems therapy is looking at the whole family system. So if the child is having an issue, right? Historically, they would just see a therapist, and they talk to them about their beliefs and their patterns. And family systems, the recognition that no, but their issues may be reflective of the broader family system. And it's
right,
like maybe there's a role they have to play because no one in the family is playing that role. If mom or dad are failing to be the assertive one, maybe the child feels like, oh, I have to be assertive. And then, mom or dad brings them to therapy thinking, oh, they need to be fixed. They need to stop being so rebellious. And it turns out it's actually the system that's the issue. So he was doing this work for a while, and then realized it wasn't always all that effective. And then he had some clients that would say things like, well, a part of me, wants, like, let's say, I think one of the quintessential examples he uses in some of his books is like anorexia, right? Part of me really does want to eat, but a part of me is just can't bring myself to do it. And as he hears this, he's like, "Are they schizophrenic? Like, are they, is this like?" But he heard it time and again, and he starts to realize that this isn't a mental illness. This is just a common human experience, is that we actually have different parts inside ourselves, right? We tend to think of ourselves as one whole human. You're Jesse, I'm Dave. But, I always use that kind of related example of like, if I'm just one person, how come I can at the same time like want to eat the candy and not
Right.
want to eat the candy, right?
Right.
It's like this funny experience we have as humans. So that's where the internal part of internal family systems comes. He said, oh, maybe we have these kind of family systems inside of us. And that's actually causing some of the patterns that are showing up in his patients and in humans in general. And, I've like the most common example where this comes up with clients is when they're struggling to make a decision. And, they even say it this way often.
Part
If
of me
you,
wants to go in the
yeah,
house. Part of me wants to sell the company. Part of me wants to.
totally. Part of me wants out, right? Wants to just get out, and part of me wants to swing for the fences, right? They have an acquisition offer. God, part of me just wants to take it, but part of me wants to just raise money and like see how big this can be. And they see that as a problem, because we, especially entrepreneurs or, people who are used to getting accolades for being smart and knowing the answer, are like, oh no, I'm confused. This is bad. And what I'll, we can go as deep as we want into IFS, but the sort of lightweight version is just let the parts speak,
Right.
right? So I'm like, okay, the part of you that doesn't want to, what was my, sell the company and wants to go for it. What does it want for you? It's
Right.
like, oh yeah, I want to see what I'm made of, and I want to, you know, go for it and be courageous. Okay, the part of you that does want to sell, oh, I'm tired, I want to break, I want to, and usually, just like any good negotiation, right? Harvard had this whole, a theme and course of study around interest-based negotiation, which was basically like instead of staying at the position level, oh, I want X, well, I want Y. If you understand the underlying interest, you can find the common ground and the win for all. We can do this internally. Like, oh, okay, well, okay, if I want to break, but I want to go for it, maybe I can take a sabbatical, or maybe I can take a secondary and take some money off and I can
Right.
relax a little bit. But, so I find it, it's really useful to think of these different parts as distinct, because then you can do this kind of work almost like a facilitated negotiation. And then what we often find is both of these parts are below the line in a state of threat, not trusting each other.
Right.
So I'll often go through this process of like, okay, what are these parts not trusting about each other?
Right.
Well, the one who wants to sell doesn't really trust that I'll be able to like enjoy the experience of going
Mm,
for it and it'll
yeah.
actually be fulfilling. And the one who wants to go for it doesn't trust that selling it, that he'll feel good about himself because he'll feel like he's sold out, and the more you just get curious about the interplay, because there is an interplay. That's the idea of the system of these parts. Usually, you can uncover sort of what's not being seen that allows for some resolution.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me, I think we've been talking about this over text and stuff, but and I'll just give a little bit more of the lingo. I guess they say there's protector parts and exiled parts. And so an exiled part is like the kind of what we were talking about earlier, like, oh, I'm not a victim. That's not me. Or I'm not angry. Or I'm not a hero. Like that's not I don't roll like that. This is some part of you. And I think the other thing you've said to me at different times I find very valuable is everybody is everything.
Yeah,
Like
we
this
all
let
have
go of the
all the
notion of
parts.
personality that like we all are everything, and then we've sort of we put weight on different parts of a thing that we then call our personality. So but what we exile, okay, that's the exile. Then there's protector parts, and they show up in two different ways. Um, one is manager, which is sort of the person who keeps you humming along day in and day out, and it's like, oh well, I'm a leader, I'm an accountable person, whatever it is. And then there's these things called firefighters, where when you're really under a state of threat, they show up out of nowhere. And you can kind of see how it mirrors the drama triangle. I'll give my example. Like I would say I'm not a victim. My day to day is probably hero. Like I'm Mr. Energy and positive and spinning things and ideas. And then if you come too close, historically, I think I've grown out of this for the most part, but I would clap back at you real hard, and I would be able to go
Mhm.
in Mr. Debate mode and I'd argue and win a debate. And
Yes.
those were three examples of sort of how that exile manager and firefighter.
Yeah, and all of it is like survival patterning. If you think about just, I was just mapping it in my mind to fight, flight, freeze, right?
Hmm.
Like we've heard of, oh, what happens when we're scared? Fight is villain, right? Bully. Flight is hero, right? We want to run away from feeling the thing, so we
Yep.
save the
Yep.
day. So, and then freeze is victim, feels stuck.
Yep.
So it's a
And
it's
the other thing I would say, and you were kind of alluding to this, but like as I've been doing some of this work, and I'll just actually describe it because it's so present for me now, is like
yeah.
there's this, for me, there's this exiled part that's like it feels like a younger, sad little boy who probably wasn't able to be sad for not to blame anyone, just like that's just how I grew up, and then I'm like learning all this about myself. Then there's a part that has kind of sits like almost like physically feels like it sits on top, and it's a little older, it's like 8 or 9, and it's like,
Mm,
oh dude, I'm gonna be really smart and well liked and
mm,
achieve, and but it's very, it's actually very fear and anxious, it feels anxious. And up until probably about a year ago, I would have never even told, if you said, hey, Jesse, you have anxiety, are you anxious? I'd be like, nah, what do you mean? I'm Mr. Cool. And then on top of that is like a whole array of parts of me. There's like the guy who's a visionary who looks out to the future. There's the idea guy. There's problem solving guy. There's positive spin, and they're all doing stuff. And then even there's others, this other set, I would just call it out, of like a judging part that likes to judge, or an apathetic part sometimes that shows up and is that, and those are more hero-y. Actually, I'm realizing that they
mm,
actually,
mm.
the judging part tries to, now the funny thing about all of these, so like I was telling you, I think the other day, like my whole personality has been to avoid sadness, basically. Like that's how it's been constructed. And we're learning about me, and I'm learning about me, and it's great. But one funny thing is I've been doing every day, I've been doing this meditation you and I've been talking about, and every day I'm just like, how are you, what's going on with you? And the answer to the question of what do you want, every single part has the exact same answer. I want to keep Jesse safe.
Mm.
All of them, other than the little boy who's like, I just want to cry. I just want to cry. And even he
Mm.
wants to feel safe in that crying, but but every other part is just like, I'm just trying to keep this guy safe.
Yeah, there's so much in there. Um, yeah, just to be clear, when you say you're meditating, you're listening to the different parts, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I mean, there's a meditation they
Yeah.
give in the book, No Bad Parts, which is the IFS book I read, and in the meditation, it's like super. It's a really interesting system. It's even somewhat more passive than CLG, where it's just kind of like, hey, what's going on with you? What do you need? What are you saying? And
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
I find it. I mean, I found it to be pretty valuable.
Yeah. So, I spent a couple of years training in NLP, neuro linguistic programming, which has a similar kind of understanding about the different parts. And one of the things that they said was every part of you has an intended positive outcome.
Yeah,
To the point. There's no bad parts. It's not trying to sabotage you. It's not trying to get in the way. And so it's useful to get curious. What is the intended positive outcome? And even when there's parts that are in conflict, like the example of, part of me wants to sell, part of me wants to swing for the fences. I think you made this point, if you ask what's the intended positive outcome, they'll both say, "Oh, I want Jesse or I want Dave, to be
to be
happy
happy.
and
Yeah,
fulfilled." And even that can be useful to realize, "Oh, we're on the same team here.
yeah,
We just have different strategies we've learned or believe will work to meet that outcome." And again,
yeah.
just like
And I
any,
think it's particularly powerful to do this with the ugliest parts of yourself,
yeah, so
like the liar, the one who's a liar in me. And starting to really, and you and I have done that work together for me, but
yeah,
like I think that's
let's
where it
go
really,
there. Yeah, because I think you mentioned exiles, which is what IFS calls it. I've also heard it referred to as like your shadow. These are the parts of you that you deny, that you judge, and if you come back to this point that like we all have all the parts, right? One easy way to know the parts you deny is, and we talked about this, I think, in a previous episode, is projection, right? If you look out of the world, you're like, that's bad, or you get really triggered or upset. Oh, that guy's such a liar. Use this example. It's likely telling you, oh, you don't, you won't, you haven't loved that part of yourself.
Right.
Because let's face it, let's keep using this example. We're all human and we all lie.
All lie. Yeah.
We all lie. We lie to ourselves, subtly, small ways. Oh, no, no, buddy, that toy's not available,
Right.
or, um, and sometimes in big ways. And the way we've sort of most of us have learned to relate to ourselves is like we're bad and we need to be controlled, right? And so, oh, I got to stamp out that part. I got to make the liar wrong. I got to shove it down deep and like not see it, not embrace it. And ironically, the result of that is that these parts tend to leak out, right, in unhealthy ways, right? Or um, I'm not a jerk, I'm a nice guy, right? So I like bury deep down the like really aggressive, assertive one. But then if I get really upset or, I might get really triggered, all of a sudden, then I really am a jerk. Um, as opposed to if you can love that part, can I love the one in me who wants to lie because I'm scared,
Yeah.
or
Well, and as for me, when I was doing this work, I mean, again, the I was doing this with a therapist here, and she, you're getting and talking. I'm talking to this anxious, fear-y part,
yeah, yeah.
and it's kind of a crazy experience because it really does talk back to you. I don't know
Mm,
how else to describe it than it like you ask it questions and it talks. And so I'll share two things that were crazy. One is it was pretty upset. It's like mad at me. It's like, dude, you pretended like I didn't exist for 30 years.
mm,
And here I've been working my ass off trying to like keep you, on the straight and narrow. And then recently, like I think earlier this week, I was like, what do you need to feel safe? I asked that question. And it was like, I need the judging part to stop judging me for how I'm feeling. And it's
mm,
like, oh yeah, dude. And I like judge I don't, and I judge others who are anxious. I'm like, dude, get your shit together. Like, don't
mm.
even like, I've gotten better at this, but like my wife gets a little anxious on planes. And I used to like a few years ago, I'm like, what are you worrying about? Like, here's the statistics or whatever. And it's like, there's just that anyone behaving that way would, because that part of me was like,
Yeah,
just judging all the
anytime we're judging, we're just avoiding feeling something we don't want to feel.
right.
Um, but
So
let's go. Yeah,
I want
let's
to I
go
want to
there.
go. Well, I want to go now and talk. You were earlier. You were going to talk about we've kind of gone deep on all these like things. Now it's like, so then what? Like, why?
Oh
Cool,
yeah.
Jesse. You've been talking to yourself. You're kind of weird. That's weird. And there's this triangle. Like, what's the point of all of this stuff? Like, it all sounds entertaining, but like, why is it useful? And how do you then use it to?
Well, let me first just key off something you said, which is you're realizing in some way you've organized your entire life to avoid sadness. I think that's a really profound and important insight, right? And I think most people, so just for anyone listening, it's worth reflecting on. Like, which emotions have you organized your entire system and life and personality to avoid feeling? And when you start to recognize that and start, like you are, to welcome that feeling, all of a sudden you gain a ton of freedom
Yeah.
because you no longer have to, and it is interesting to think about how many founders might be doing their entire startup to avoid some kind of sense of shame or not feeling good enough or, heartbreak or some feeling that they don't want to feel. And if that's where you're coming from, it's never going to ultimately be fulfilling.
Right.
And
And I mean, I texted you this question the other day. I was like, who would I be if I wasn't afraid to feel sadness?
yeah,
Like, what I would probably swing bigger. Would I be bootstrapping or would I just raise a lot? Like, it sort of created this whole other path that it kind of blindly felt shut off to me. I didn't know it was not there, but
yeah.
there's that. And then, I mean, and then, the tendencies of like, it's funny how things relate. Like keeping my calendar super packed for a long time. I just told myself that's what it takes and that's what you got to do. And it turns out I was probably doing that to avoid allowing too much space to feel things.
Yeah, there's this quote, most of man's or woman's struggles comes from his inability to sit quietly alone in a room. And what that really is a reflection of is there's some feelings, and you could think of it as parts of ourselves, like the sad one, the angry one, the scared one, some parts of ourselves and some feelings that we're just unwilling to be with. And we've sort of organized ourselves to just not feel that. And so when things get quiet, it's trying to come up because it's there. And so then we go busy ourselves. And um, so I think this is really, really important. Like I think we may even want to go deeper on this notion of shadow and these exiled parts, because I think so many people, even like self-love, which comes up a lot, or self-doubt, it's like, why can't I love myself? It's because we have all these parts of ourselves that we've judged, we've pushed down, we've denied. And I think like the journey to wholeness is a journey of welcoming and embracing and loving all the parts, not just the ones we were told or believed were good, but like, the ones
All
that
of it.
are supposedly bad, because we're human and we have them all. All right.
Let's go
So
back to the drama triangle
sure.
and with the last 5 minutes now, because
Yeah, yeah.
we've talked a
What do
lot
I do
about these
about it?
challenges. Like, what do I do about it? I'm a founder. Cool. I see myself in this triangle. First of all, why should I not be in the triangle, or what payoff do I get benefit, and then
Yeah.
how do I actually get myself out of it?
Yeah. So most times where we're acting to avoid feeling scared, which is what these really are. They're ways to avoid feeling the fear, right? Oh, I go into victim, I go into villain, I go into hero, um, or we're in reactivity. It's just really inefficient. We don't end up creating the results we want, and it's like the dirty fuel. We end up feeling like this constrictive energy, and then spreading that to the team. Um, and again, we tend to keep recycling the same issues.
Right.
We don't fundamentally resolve them. So
And
that's
what
like,
you said at the top of the episode is ringing in my ears right now, which is you either play the personality or it plays you. In other words, you either, if you're not
yeah,
aware of it, it's gonna basically gonna run the show. You're not gonna be consciously choosing what you.
totally. And like, there's this notion that like, if you could behave any way any other human behaves, you could achieve anything any other human achieves, right? So like
Right.
Steve Jobs or Elon or whoever your heroes are, like, at least, like, there's no fundamental reason why you couldn't do what they do. Um, if you're
Other than you would say
conscious,
that's not who I am, right?
there
That's like
exactly, that's the comfort thing, right? So in some way, the other side of kind of the restrictive persona is total behavioral flexibility, right? If I could in any given moment show up in full presence and without some like restrictions on how I'm allowed to be, I tell myself I'm allowed to be, well, then I could show up anyway and show up the best way to meet that, to meet the moment. I could
right,
respond in a way that is most likely to create the results that I want. Right. And so that's what we're all about, in entrepreneurship, is creating something from nothing, right? Creating the
right.
results we want. Well, that behavioral flexibility that arises out of transcending the personas is what allows you to create whatever it is you wanted to create, um, and be who you want to be, maybe as importantly.
Yeah, there's one
So,
one framework I heard that was interesting, that like instead of saying threat and open it, they say
yeah.
confusion and clarity. And
Hmm.
it's kind of coming up for me a little bit of like, oh, like this triangle is confusing. There's a lot of like,
Mhm.
it's murky, it's muckety, and then all of a sudden you get
Yeah.
clarity, and everyone's had that experience of going, wait, I see this clearly, and here's what I need to go do, and blah blah blah, and it
Yeah.
crystallizes versus letting the thing ride you.
Yeah. Avoidance of fear tends to distort our perception of reality. Right. And by one way we avoid fear is we go into our minds and actually like imagine all these future things that might happen. That's the clearest example of distortion of reality. Like, most entrepreneurs I know spend an inordinate amount of time imagining future issues that
Right,
might happen and trying to solve them, which is a crazy way to use your time, because you're not addressing the issues that are actually happening, and most of
right,
those issues never happen anyway. And just to be clear, that's all actually a symptom of avoiding feeling the fear.
right,
So, okay, so to your question, so awareness is always the key. It's always the first key, because most people are unconscious. They literally believe that they're the victim, or that they're at fault, or, like, they, that's where it gets really, um, well, confusing, is when you believe this distorted view of reality is real,
right,
right? I mean, people spend their entire lives in the drama triangle and believing that, oh, it's all my mom's fault. It's all this person's fault. Life is hard. Life is bad,
right.
And so,
And I think one of the reasons that IFS, the personality or the parts thing works well, and it's been working well for me, is like, oh, when I think of myself as anxious or scared, that's actually scary. Like I'm like, oh no, but I'm like, oh, there's a part of me that's that. And I'm like, yeah, that is 100% true. There's a part of like the part of me
Yeah.
language. If you just
Yeah.
introduce that in your day to day, like part of me is this. I found myself being willing to share things that are probably previously I wouldn't been willing to share. And even again, like I'm there, the language does something that makes it just don't call it you, and that's valuable
Yeah.
because you're not identifying with the those individual
Well,
things.
yeah, that's a whole important topic is identification, right? Because if you're identified as your thoughts, as your feelings, it's a different it's much more challenging to just observe and be with those thoughts and feelings. So if we take, to your point, if you just see, oh, a part of me is scared, well, you're recognizing that there's something more expansive than that part of you that's noticing that that part of you is
Right.
scared. So so the awareness in some way is that more expansive thing, and becoming aware of something you previously weren't aware of is like the 80/20, right?
Right.
Just recognize, oh, I'm in a state of threat, I'm below the line, I'm seeing the world through this victim lens. That's always the first step.
Yeah, I've
Because
heard it
you're
said as like the second it's like putting sunlight on, a mildew towel. Like you don't even have to do anything. Once the light's on it, it just or sunlight on a shadow, the shadow disappears, and there's so
yes.
much of just awareness that solves these issues.
I love that point, and I'm seeing that more and more clearly, and it's really counterintuitive because we tend to think, no, no, I got to do something about it. I have to fix it. Often, just the awareness, it will just naturally unfold. Now that said, it can be useful to exaggerate. This is also
Hmm.
counterintuitive. Like a lot of clients find if you go like, okay, go all the way into the persona, right? Like, we have this exercise that again I learned from Conscious Leadership Group. It's like actually get on the drama triangle, like you're on it anyway, but like really get on it and ham it up, almost like you're an actor. And I'm like, okay, play the victim, like, oh God, oh poor me,
Yeah.
woe is me, it's so hard, and like, oh, it's their fault, and just like really exaggerate it. That can help you see the pattern, and it's naturally playful, and it'll kind of loosen the grip of the pattern. So again, if you come back to this idea of like, if you don't, um, either you play the persona or it plays you. If you take that literally, play the persona, like really play it,
Yeah.
like play it up, play, and that will automatically loosen the grip of it and help you see it more clearly. Um,
One of
and
my
then,
favorite stories about our work together when we first started working together, I tell this story, and it's about all of this. I actually should have started with this. Was like, I was looking at some friend of mine who had sold their company for $1 billion and kind of being like, oh, I could do that, or like like just kind of being unsatisfied with what I had and looking over
mm,
there. And you were like, I want you to like do that for the next week with everything. Like I want a different car, I want a different wife, I want a different kids. And my
mm,
first reaction was like, dude, are you crazy? Like I have like I clearly like no, no. And then you were like, just trust me, do it. And I was like, fine. And you didn't tell me why, but then I think you called me 4 or 5 days later. You're like, how's it going? And I'm like, it just seems so silly.
yeah,
And I think what you said to me very specific, I can remember was I can't stop you from having that thought or that persona showing up, but I can basically tell you not to let it have power over you because once you note it as I think we named it Mr. Unsatisfied or something. It's like, oh, he's gonna keep coming, and then you're just like, oh, there he is. Like he sees something, and it's worked wonders for me because that has not. I mean, it's been 5, 6 years since that happened probably, and shows up all the time. It just it he comes and he goes. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, like I gotta get back to work now, and versus it used to be with me for days, weeks, or months at a time.
yeah. And that's the beauty of naming and recognizing our patterns, our personas. There's the in the moment awareness, but the by recognizing it, we know what to look for. It's easier to spot it in the moment, right? That's a great example, Mr. Unsatisfied, or the comparing Charlie. I think I had a client, we called it comparing Charlie. And once we named it, it was just much easier to recognize it. And again, in that moment of recognition, there's a way, the fact that you can see it tells you that you're not it, right? Like if it's an object of your awareness, it
Totally,
can't be you. So then it already gives you some spaciousness and some
totally.
choice around, do I want to keep playing that? Is that serving me? Maybe sometimes, yeah, it's motivating me. I want to compare. Or but most of the time, like, no, that's just a persona. I can let that go.
All right, well, we're up at time here. Maybe next week we can talk more about the shadow stuff, but then also talk even more on the what does it mean to kind of work from presence, and how does this stuff start to show up and flip?
Sounds
You
great.
want to bring us home, Dave? Any parting thoughts?
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, maybe as an exercise, I liked what you just said. So, listener, I would challenge you to identify one persona, right, that you tend to play, one pattern, and see if you'd be willing for the next week to just like ham it all the way up, right? So, like, if it's comparing Charlie, great. Compare like crazy, compare to everyone, to everything, and just see what happens when you kind of really exaggerate that persona.
All right. Heart of Entrepreneurship. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Pleasure. Bye.